All right. So I guess we'll get started. We're probably running short on people. I'm assuming with either the field trip tomorrow or just general conflicts for today. But nonetheless, we'll get rolling here. The June 2023 exam. So this was last June's Regents. The Regents our school took last year during the mock. You guys took the January. I know some of you are confused by that, but there is a January and August exam on top of the June. What are those for? They're for a few things. This isn't going to pertain to anyone in here, but like if you were to hypothetically fail the exam, that's usually what the August is for. The January is for a few different reasons as well. Same idea, maybe failing the exam. Sometimes you can maybe take it like at the halfway point of the school year. Maybe let's say you move to the area and you're kind of catching up. So a few reasons they do offer it 3 times a year. We have January, June, and August. But I know they're not like one's not easier or harder. They're all, the same degree of difficulty. So the June 2023, let's get rolling here. So I have the multiple choice worked out. So if you don't want to spoil it, or should I? How should we do this? I'm debating here. I guess we'll just look at my key because again, we want to go through this quickly. Otherwise, it's going to take the full amount of time. So we'll look at the answer key of it. So we'll kind of spoil things here, but we'll more so quickly talk about some of them questions that stood out. There was another one of those cross-canceling questions. So that strategy, that tip that I told you guys last week, if you were here, came up on the mock, came up on this. So I would imagine, it's not going to be the craziest thing in the world if you guys see it on June 4th. Let's take a look. So maybe we'll do this like a few at a time. Let's see how many I could fit here. So we'll look at the first 4 multiple choice, a little scope, a little overview. I always find question 1, I think I said this a few times already, but I always find question 1, like they kind of get you off on a good starting pace here. Put something nice and easy. They're not going to put like the hardest question as question 1. So we have a dots example. Dots, you don't want to make a silly mistake and excuse me, you don't want to make a silly mistake and choose something like choice 2, or maybe even like choice 3, right? Dots, difference of 2 squares. You want different signs in your bubbles right away. So that eliminates 2 and 4, and you're also taking square roots. So choice 1 there for dots. We have a rational, irrational application in question 2. We're looking for an irrational answer. The only one that works out to be an irrational is choice 3. Even though there's a lot of radicals here, pretty much everything is a perfect square, except for radical 7, which can't be simplified. So 6 plus radical 7 is going to be an irrational result. Can't be written as a ratio of 2 integers. Everything else is a whole number. Choice 1, 2, and 4 work out to nice whole numbers. Choice 3, not so nice. Non-terminating, non-repeating decimal. Okay, number 3, you could just do substitution here, mental math. It's relatively simple. If you want to utilize y equals, you can just to check. Choice 1 does fit the point, -3, -8. If you substitute in a -3 for x, you will get -8 for y. Okay, and the last one here, we'll kind of maybe look at 4 or 5 at a time. A polynomial question, combining like terms. Just be careful, you are distributing a negative there. So you're distributing -3 and then combining your like terms. I like to do something like this, like underlinings, little circles, some people do, just to match up my like terms. So number 4 is choice 2. Nice, easy start here. Nothing crazy for questions 1 through 4. Any questions, comments with this set? Pretty fair, right? Questions? We're good? Can you guys do me a favor, write in the chat, were we able to do the multiple choice? Hopefully you're not like, I forgot to do this and I'm kind of just copying your answers because that would... Okay, cool. And we're good with these 4 out of 4. All right, let's look at, oh, there's one more on this page. Number 5, I think there was one like this on the mock with multiplying. This one is or subtracting, I should say, but similar question. You could do this like the real way, which is how I did it. You could also just, it's kind of silly because you could just sit there and be like, all right, I'm going to keep, in this case, the pattern is subtracting six. You could just sit there in your calculator and be like, I'm going to do this 20 more times until I get the answer. But the real way here, I'm doing the explicit formula. So the first term is -5. The pattern or the common difference is subtracting 6. I plug in a 24. It becomes 23 because it's n minus 1. And you will get -143 as your answer. So you could do it like the real way or just hack it, just sit there and subtract 6 a bunch of times. Note you are given this formula. The explicit formula is on your reference sheet, so this isn't something you'd have to memorize. For question 5, choice 2. Good on the first page? Yep, does show. The next set, let's do these three. So question 6, as opposed to the one on the mock, this one's pretty clear. It says when completing the square. I know the part 2 question that you guys saw, a lot of you commented like, I didn't know what this question was asking. It's basically the same question, just think about how much easier it is the way that this one is phrased. Obviously, it's multiple choice, which makes it even easier, but I think the phrasing definitely does help here. Because a lot of you guys told me like, hey, I knew how to do that question. I just wasn't sure what it was asking. So here we move the 77 over, and the magic number, which is half of b squared. So half of 18 is 9, squared is 81. You add that to both sides. On the right, you're going to get 4. And your bubble is always going to be half of b in the bubble. You don't have to sit and do some product. So if your trinomial was -18, your bubble is going to be half of that or -9. Another way to do this question, you can backdoor it. If you box method out choice 1, you know that you'll get that trinomial. So if you're blanking out and you just totally forget how to CTS, how to complete the square, you can backdoor this by working backwards. You box it out and just show that, hey, I got that same trinomial. Number 7, you could see I put kind of as my work here, like, hey, just use tables. There's no other way to, you can get kind of in depth here, or just type them in your calculator, go to your tables. Which one has the greatest value when x is greater than 1? So I guess look at 2, let's say, x equals 2. Type them all in. Hey, when x equals 2, which one of these is the biggest? It's going to be choice 1. And also just kind of logic-wise, exponential functions are going to grow the quickest. Linear would probably be the worst choice here. 3 and 4, we have a quadratic and a cubic. Exponentials are going to shoot up more rapidly because your exponent is the variable. But you don't even need to get that in depth with it. Again, just use y equal tables and just observe. Number 8, we're looking at a exponential growth function, and it wants to know what the exponent means. The exponent in your formula, which is, this, write it. I was going to say it, but a little too complicated. A equals P, parentheses, 1 plus or minus R to the T power, right? Something like that. We use different letters here. P represents the principal or starting amount. So choice 3 is, the 1300 represents the starting amount. 1 plus or minus R. So in this case, this is a growth function. It's 165%. So very large percentage of growth here. And it wants to just know what the exponent means. In an exponential growth or decay model, the exponent represents time. So in this case, choice 4, the number of time periods, whether that's years or days, depends on the situation here, but the number of time periods, choice 4. In your growth or decay models, your exponent, basically the variable, is your, usually we say years, unless otherwise noted. Like, hey, how much money will you have in 5 years? You plug in a 5 for x, right? So x here represents the number of time periods, how long, basically. All right, here we are. This is a good one to kind of have solo by itself. So this was the one we've been talking about. People that weren't in the meet last week were confused on the mock. This is your, and you're going to recognize it right away because all the choices are going to be ratios. Here we're looking for, say, like, figure out what you want. So what you want is items per minute, items over minutes. Okay, and we said cross canceling works out the best. So weeks cancel with weeks, days cancel with days, hours cancel with hours, When I say cancel, we're looking for a top to bottom. Doesn't matter if they're on top of each other, they're not going to be on top of each other. Something in the numerator with something in the denominator. And you're left with items and minutes. You don't even care what the math works out to. It's just checking that way. All the other ones are going to have an issue somewhere. For example, like look at choice 3. I can't cancel out weeks. Okay, I'm going to be left with that. All right, that's not the answer. All the rest of them are going to have an issue. There's only going to be one that works out to what you want. I want to take a little bit extra time with this one. Does anyone still have an issue with these? Do these kind of make more sense now? Were you able to get it on the mock? I know we were around like 70% on the mock. 70% of people got it correct. We'd like to see that a little bit higher, but obviously not everyone was in the meet. The first one is the numerator. The top is the numerator, I think is what you mean. But yeah, before it gives you the, oh, okay, yeah. Let's see for 4. That's a good point, Caleb. Weeks, weeks. Hours, hours. Days, days. Oh, okay. So Caleb's saying, yeah, the bottom one gives you minutes per item. A little tricky. Maybe people would put choice 4 just because they see that's what's left. But this is what told me like what ratio we were looking for. Items shipped each minute. So in 7th grade math, we call this like unit rate. I'm not sure if you guys did it in 6th grade, but each minute tells me I want minutes in the denominator. It's like when you say miles per hour, hours are in the denominator, right? Yep. Good question or good point. So number 9, choice 2. All right, this one I think I put on either a review sheet or it was actually on your quadratic test. This one had a little trick. I know when I was proctoring the Regents last year, I kind of flipped through the book as you guys are taking it, which is nice. It's the first time I'm seeing it, and I got a little nervous when I saw this question because I'm like, "Oh shoot, this is a little tricky." It's a double root. What a double root means is the function doesn't pass through that point. It kind of like hits it and turns right around. And you might be saying, who cares? But how we incorporate that when we write the function is we write it twice. So instead of just putting like choice 2, which I'll talk about another reason how you could have crossed off choice 2, you're squaring x minus 2. Because it's a double root, because it does that turnaround, x minus 2 is counted as like basically 2 roots. So x minus 2 squared. So choice 3 is your answer, moral of the story, because of that double root. Now, another reason, and my students last year actually did quite well on this question, even though I was nervous, and they told me why they didn't fall for choice 2. It's not a quadratic, right? If you box method out, you'll get a trinomial for choice 2, right? It's pretty obvious. This doesn't look like a quadratic. So that's another way that you could have been like, wait, something fishy is going on here. Okay, maybe even typing into a calculator, looking at the graph. If you're like, hey, it's either 2 or 3 and I'm not sure, that could be another strategy maybe. But yeah, this is a cubic. You don't need to go crazy with knowing what they look like, but just know if you see that double root, we've seen this happen a few times. Maybe you saw a question like this on your test, the quadratic test, but a double root, we have that root squared. A little tricky. So multiple choice, a little sneaky so far. The first 10 questions, a little bit harder than the multiple choice on the mock. Function notation question, pretty straight up. Just plug in a -4. Be very careful with your PEMDAS stuff here. This is where I would recommend, I talked to during our lesson today, I said, I compared this to like the piecewise function on the mock where people made a mistake doing -x squared. To avoid all that, because this is like how you would actually, do it. To avoid this, if you're unsure, just type this function into y equals. Then you avoid having to worry about like, did I do it correctly? Did I not square it? Did I do something like that? Type the function in exactly as it looks, and then just look next to -4. You'll see -7. Or if you actually know what's going on here and how to write it and things like that. But if you're not 100% confident, just type the function as it appears to avoid any of that. Okay, negative x squared does work out to negative 16 because you're not squaring, well, you are squaring negative 4, but then you're hitting it with a negative sign after the fact. Okay, number 11, choice 2. Number 12, volume is length times width times height. Kind of a random question here if you did forget that. Well, choice 3 and 4, I guess, are just adding them. Something a formula used in sixth grade. So I think a lot of you guys are familiar with this. It is on the reference sheet, I think. I'll double check, but um, that's not really what they're testing here. They just kind of a reading comprehension. Hey, the length and width are going to be increased by x, so we want the plus x for the length and width, and we want the 8 to stay put. We want the 8 to stay the same. So choice 1, a little sneaky. We do want the height to be the same, so we don't want to add anything there. Choice 2 for number 12. We'll pause here a moment. We're at the halfway point for the multiple choice. Any questions so far with the multiple choice? Kind of difficult. I would say there's 2 of them so far that were a little sneaky. I have to look back at the data for last year, but I forget which multiple choice question was our lowest. Probably question 9, question 10. Number 13, an exponent rules question. Now, exponent rules, I would usually file under like, okay, this is easy. This is, nothing too crazy. This is our lowest, not this question, but exponent rules was the topic that was the lowest on the mock Regents, weirdly enough. I know that one was just kind of tricky, but we don't want to take this for granted here. It is choice 1. So when you multiply 4 to the x times 4 to the third, you add exponents. So what's x plus 3? X plus 3. So kind of like a working backwards one, I guess, because the expression in the question has already applied the rule. This is kind of like breaking it apart, whereas you go like this way normally. How could you do this question if you forgot your exponent rules? How could you do this question if you forgot? For function notation questions, will we ever have to look? Yeah, mapping diagrams pop up. That one we did today was a Regents question. How could you do this if you forgot your rules? Yeah, type in this into y equals. I told you guys whenever a question says like which of these are equivalent, you could use y equals. So type this into y1, type in the 4 choices, and then just see which one matches. Only one of them is going to match. Only one of them is going to match. That will work for any like which of these is equivalent, and it's a factoring question and we don't know how to factor, let's say. Hopefully you do by now. But you can always use for any equivalence, or which of these is the same, which of these is not like the others. You can use y equals tables as like a little hack. Don't even go to the graphs because it's going to be chaos. Just go right to the tables and see which one matches. Or if you know your rules inside and out, go for that. Okay, 13, choice 1. 14, you have 7 quarters. So 7 quarters is $1.75. All 4 choices have that if you did forget. But and how many dimes? We do need to incorporate that dimes are 10 cents. I think there are a few people that messed up how much a nickel or dime was on the mock region. So just be aware that a dime is 10 cents. So choice 1 looks close to the answer, but it's not incorporating the value of each dime. So let's say you have 5 dimes. Choice 1 would be treating it like $5. We'd want to multiply it by 0.10, how much each dime is worth. So hey, if I have 5 of them, it's 50 cents. So anytime you're doing like a money equation, a money inequality, you want to incorporate the value as a coefficient. Okay. Hey, tickets are $8 and X number of adult tickets, 8X. Anytime you're doing a money situation, your coefficient is the value of that variable. 14, choice 2. 15, we've seen this question before. I think it was in our rearranging formula lesson. That's the area of a trapezoid, and it wants us to get it to say h equals. We call this rearranging formulas, literal equations. I multiply by 2, that gets rid of the 1/2. And then you could actually just divide by that parentheses. You don't have to segment it. You could just divide by that bubble. You definitely don't want to distribute the h. That's only going to cause more chaos. So just divide by that whole binomial, and you'll get h equals 2a over b1 plus b2. Okay, 16, what does multiplying something by 1/2 do? So we would file this under transformation question. Multiplying by anything between 0 and 1 makes the graph wider. Okay, to make the graph skinnier or more narrow, you don't have to multiply by something greater than 1. So something like 2, 3, that makes the graph increasingly more narrow. Multiplying by anything between 0 and 1, the closer you get to 0, it's going to get wider and wider. If you forgot this, maybe type in the absolute value of x, type in 1/2 the absolute value of x, and you'll even visually see it. Like, oh yeah, it does get wider if you're confused between choice 3 and 4. Reflections involve negatives, so it's not 1 or 2. Yep, we call this a vertical compression. Okay, 16(3). So a little bit easier page there for the multiple choice. You have a two-way frequency table. We see these pretty much every year on the more recent ones, so expect to see something like this. Of the people that preferred sports cars, so that sets your denominator. That first half of the sentence, what do you call that, a clause? That first half of the sentence sets your denominator out of 84. It's not out of 59. That would be out of all the males. So out of the people that preferred sports cars, so 84, how many of them were male, or what percent were males? 38 out of 84. Make that into a decimal. Okay, 0.452. So choice 2. As soon as you make it into a decimal, the answer is going to be obvious, but technically you multiply it by 100 to make it a percent. 17, choice 2. 17, choice 2. We have a quadratic here. This is not something where you would want to use quad formula. You would divide by 2. You know, x squared equals 36. Hopefully no one put choice 3 here, thinking like, oh, 6 squared is 36. You take the square root of 36, and technically it is positive and negative 6. Plus and minus, we say. When you take the square root, plus and minus. For 16, how is it 3? Huh? Did I choose the wrong choice here? G of x is wider than fx, yeah. I think you maybe read it the wrong way. G of x is the one getting multiplied by 1/2, so it's going to be wider. Yep. You're maybe just reading it the wrong way. For 19, which functions have the same vertex? Okay, 19, little tricky here because one is in vertex form. If you didn't notice that, we'll eventually go over quadratics again. We may be a little rusty with that, even though we didn't do it too long ago. So the vertex is staring you in the face. It's negative 2, 5. Visually, the graph, you could see it's at negative 2, 5. So those two are the same. The table, you don't actually see the vertex, but you do see negative 2, 5. So some people, hopefully this wasn't the case, but chose choice 4. Roman numeral 2 does not have a vertex at negative 2, 5. It's somewhere in between. We don't know where, but remember we talked about that symmetry. You have to have that one central point, and then you have the mirror imaging. So it's somewhere like negative 1.5, whatever it may be, negative 1.5, comma 6. Just because you see negative 2, 5 in the table, that's not the vertex. That's not the central point of the table. So a little sneaky there. It's only Roman numeral 1, IHOP rule, so negative 2, 5. And for the graph, visually, it's at negative 2, 5 as well. So number 19, choice 3. Did we do okay with 19? 19 was okay? 18 was 4. Thank you. All right, last few multiple choice here. 20, a little, I'm not going to say sneaky, but just like a weird question. The domain of a quadratic. Right away, the domain of any quadratic is all real numbers. Choice two. You may be thinking this as I almost did this at first too, making my key like I feel like they ask this question a lot and ask the range because the range for a quadratic you have to kind of decide like where's the low point, where's the maximum. But domain is easy right away. It's all real numbers. The domain isn't restricted. It goes on forever to the left. It goes on forever to the right. So negative to positive infinity. Choice two, all real numbers. I think on the mock you guys had one like this, but it said range. So domain here, all real numbers. 21, we have a recursive sequence like word problem. You get $10 every year after you double it and you subtract 8. Double it and give it to the next person. Which recursive formula? So right away, choice 1 and 2 are out. Those are not recursive formulas. Recursive formulas need A1. They need a starting value, and then they need something that relates it to a previous. 1 and 2 would be what we call explicit. So 1 and 2 are out if you know your vocab. So it's between 3 and 4. So which one reflects doubling it and subtracting 8? Choice 3. Remember, the relationship between this and this just means previous. They also wrote it kind of the weird way because usually we call this n and the other one n minus 1. But this means the same thing. It means previous and next. Previous and next. Recursive is the one where you need to know the value before it to get the next one. So hey, if you want to find A5, you need to know A4. If you want to find the fourth term, you need to know the third. Recursive formula, you need two things. You need the first term, and then you need some relationship between like how to go from term to term. Usually we write it that way. So something like this would be doubling to go from term to term. Recursive is needing to know what comes before it. And explicit is, hey, just plug this in, you get the 50th term right away. We'll go over sequences. So why isn't it 4? 4, what 4 translates to, it's very similar looking. 4 is saying subtract 8 from your previous amount and then double it. That's different than what this question was asking. This question said you double it and then subtract 8. So it's just like the order is flip-flopped. So hypothetically, if you got $10 the first week, the next week you would double it, 20, and then subtract 8. So $12. What choice 4 is saying is subtract 8 first. So 10 minus 8 is 2, and then doubling it, $4. So it's like switching the order. Yep. Double first, so times 2, and then subtract 8 after. Choice 4 is subtracting 8 first. 22, solving an inequality. If you're not a big fan of fractions, don't worry, don't stress. So like, oh, negative 2/5 minus 1/3. I don't know how to do that. We can enter these into our calculator. You don't need to worry about common denominators. So that gives you negative 11 over 15. I then multiplied by the reciprocal, which is negative 15 over 11. Since I'm multiplying by a negative, I do flip my sign here. The 11s cancel out, so you get a nice answer of negative 15 on the right. And we do flip the sign. So if you put choice 4, you just forgot to flip. We do flip the sign. X is less than or equal to negative 15. Solving an inequality, probably a multiple choice that you will encounter as well. Polynomial vocab. I just wrote down everything here. The degree is the highest exponent, so that's 2. The lead coefficient is the coefficient of that highest exponent, so 3. And the constant is negative 2, not 2. So that's what choice 3 says. But the constant is not 2. Since it says minus 2, that is a negative 2. So choice 4, second degree, and the lead coefficient of 3. And the last one, a number set question. I think we had a do now like this yesterday or a few days ago. If you're selling, what are you selling? Boxes of nails. What would be a good domain? So boxes of nails would be something like 1, 2, 3, 4, non-negative integers. Again, I feel like they don't use the proper vocab because you would just say whole numbers. Non-negative integers or whole numbers would be a good one. All the other ones include negatives, so you can cross those off right away. Um, Rationals also include decimals and fractions. Real numbers include irrational numbers, so you definitely wouldn't want to use that. Knowing your number set's important. And that's the multiple choice. Okay, we'll take a little mini break here for a moment. How did we do on the multiple choice? Like I said, I found this a little bit of a challenging multiple choice section, especially early on, a few tricky ones. I think the second half was a little bit more fair than the first half, but definitely not an easy multiple choice. Not that hard. Okay. Keep in mind these are worth 2 points each. So out of 86, you're getting 48 points here. So you're getting more than well, your test will be out of a different number. You'll be out of 82, but same idea. More than half of your points come from the multiple choice. Good chunk. Any other before we move on to the part twos, the writtens? Now for the writtens, if you want to do it along with me, if you printed it, I know some of you guys said you did. I don't have an answer key worked out. I did that purposely. This way we can kind of do it together. If we're still, how are we doing on time? If we're still a little, I may speed things up or maybe skip over one if I really want to get through all of them, but hopefully we're able to. Do you think they'll go easy on us because this is a new test? I don't know. Probably not, because technically the only thing that's new about it is the fact that there's less questions. Not exactly, um, sliced bread here. Mr. Rice, today in class you went over a question that was something like if x is less than 0. Yeah. Um, Hold on to that because that's a little random, but she's talking about a multiple choice that we did during the lesson. Um, uh, it's standards as well. Like there's a curriculum, so it's technically, I don't know if you guys have definitely heard at some point like Common Core. These are called next generation learning standards. So Common Core no longer exists. So that's the other thing as well. But to be honest, for algebra, there's like one minor change. So not a lot of, they called it something new. It's not Common Core anymore. It's next generation. But again, same thing. Like it's very, very minor. Okay. So let's solve this one. 25. I'm gonna plug my iPad. All right, we have a equation here. If you have just like a notebook or loose leaf and you want to kind of solve it with me, I'm just going to zoom in. First thing that I'm going to do here, we have decimals. So no real like canceling fractions. We're just going to kind of deal with it. It does say algebraically, so I'm going to show my work. If I have some like weird calculator hack, I'm not really going to try that. Just going to do it the old fashioned way here. All right. After you distribute, you get this. I'm going to move the 2.4x over to the right. I'm going to add 22.68 to both sides. So cancel, cancel. I get 9.2x. Again, I'm even using mine right now, if you could tell, just to verify the arithmetic. And now I'm going to divide both sides by 9.2. And 1932 divided by 9.2, we get an answer of 2.1. Okay. Not a bad equation to start with. You do have variables on both sides, so make the decision where you want to bring your variables to. In this case, I chose to just bring them to the right. Could bring them to the left as well. Hate distributing on the decimal. Yeah, just use a calculator. I even used one. Saves time. Okay, I will post this as well if you missed something, if you came late. I'll post not the video, but the PDF as well. All right, this one is interesting. Take a moment. I'll stop talking. This is one you can kind of do in like 30 seconds, a minute. I want you to write it down like what you would write down because there's something going on with this one. We have a function here. It says state the zeros of f of x. So write it down. And then it says explain your reasoning. Take a minute, zoom in as much as I can if you don't have it open or in front of you. State the zeros and then explain your reasoning. For a an easier question, this one had something fishy. Oh, Emmanuel, I missed your comment. The last one, you got a long decimal. Maybe you just had a wrong number at some point. Because 1932 divided by 9.2 is exactly 2.1. You might have just hit a wrong number. 19.32 divided by 9.2 is exactly 2.1. Yeah, that's not something I would really check. I would just kind of look over. It might be tougher to plug in. What did you guys say for this? So what are the zeros, first of all? What did you say for the zeros? Okay. -2, 2, and 3. And then explain your reasoning. Well, what can we say? How do we know? It's kind of like so simple, but like, how do you put it into words? How do we know those are the zeros? Yeah, where it hits the, I'm just going to write in shorthand here, where the graph hits the x-axis, or where y equals 0, right? That's what zeros or roots are. Okay, yeah, perfect. Few weird things with how this question was scored. If you put coordinates for the top part, they did take off. Um, So if you put like -2 comma 0, 2 comma 0, 3 comma 0, they did take off. Because if something says the zeros, they just want kind of the values. I would agree, like, come on, like you knew what I was saying if I write a coordinate, but the zeros, we would just want the number. It's kind of like if I said, what are the roots of this quadratic? I don't think anyone would say like 5 comma 0, but just be aware of that. We just want the number in that case. Yeah, you could actually say x equals. Yeah. You can't do coordinates. That's what I think there was 1 or 2 people in my class last year, they lost a point because of, they just happened to write coordinates. Maybe they thought they were being more technical or something, but it's just not the proper way of writing it. For roots or zeros, just say the number. Yeah, you're actually saying the same value, you're just not answering it correctly. Okay? Just something that, came back to me. Um Brianna has a set of blocks. Her friend says it's increasing exponentially. Is she correct? Explain your reasoning. What I always like to do for these weird shape ones is I just put the number. So how many blocks do we have? 6, 10. Okay, so is her friend correct in assuming that it's an exponential pattern? Can I just say what you write or do I elaborate? Go back to the last question. -2, 2, 3, it's where it hits the x-axis. This is where the graph hits the x-axis. This is where y equals 0, anything like that. It's the x-intercept. Is her friend correct? Is this exponential? No. No, 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 no. What can we put for reasoning here? Because we have a 0 so far just by putting no. There's 2 things you could do. You could disprove why it's. Go ahead. Yeah. Let me pull up the. You guys can't see this, but the model responses, I'll read you what they had as their 2 out of 2. So no, the numbers aren't increasing by a power each time. It keeps increasing by 2, which means it's linear. Yeah, that's what I mean. You could say like, um, oh, they gave this a 2 out of 2. The friend is not correct. It's increasing by 2. That's not really a great explanation in my eyes, but okay. Um, you want to either reference the fact that it's not being multiplied. That's what exponential is. So what would be exponential? Like 4, 8, 16, right? So no, it's not being multiplied. It's a constant rate of change, which is linear. Nala said, no, her friend is incorrect because it increases only by +2 and doesn't show a pattern that doubles the number. Yep, good. It doesn't have to be double. Don't focus on the word doubling, but it doesn't have to necessarily double to be exponential. It just has to be some pattern of multiplication. Increases instead of being multiplied. Yeah, anything like that. I would say this, not a pattern of multiplication. It's a constant rate of change, ROC, making it linear. Something like that. That's probably overkill, but it's very clear what I mean, right? So I referenced the fact that it wasn't being multiplied. I also kind of said what it was. The +2 makes it linear. Yep, pretty easy one. All right, this was um, to save some time here. This question was actually on your stat test, so we won't go through it. This one was the one where we had people make a dot plot, and then coincidentally on the mock Regents, it asked for a dot plot, and we had people make a box plot. So I jokingly said, like, just make sure you read the question carefully. I don't know why people are confusing box and dot. They don't look anything alike, but just make sure you read carefully here. This exact question was on your stat test, and virtually everyone got it correct, except for the people that just read it wrong. What I would add to this is make sure that you do this. You technically don't need to, but virtually no one did this, which is a little scary. Like, show some of your work here, which is just writing down the 5 stat summary. You didn't lose points, you didn't have to, but it's just a good procedure to do. It's going to catch some mistakes. It's going to, when you're checking it over, you don't have to retype it in. You have everything there. So don't just do like the bare minimum, like, oh, it's not asking for it, so I'm not going to show it. Just write those 5 values down. It just kind of like graphing, how I say to write down M and B or write down where to shade. It just catches mistakes. It's going to help you in the long run. 5 stat summary. Yep. Just write it down. Even though it doesn't ask for it, write it down. Okay. Again, this one was on your stat test. You'll see the answers for it. I don't remember what they even were offhand. 29, a squared plus b in standard form. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is kind of just plug in the expressions here. So they want x plus 5 squared plus x squared minus 18. Okay, this is like a simplifying question. Standard form means I want it fully cleaned up. So x plus 5 squared, don't do this. Don't just square both numbers. X plus 5 squared means x plus 5 times x plus 5. So that's technically a little mini box method question. Some of, we could get to the point where we could do these quickly. If not, draw your little 2x2 grid. X plus 5 times x plus 5 will give you x squared plus 10x plus 25. You'll have 5x and 5x, which gives you 10x. And now combining that with could drop the parentheses here. Combining that with the other, we have 2x squareds. We have 10x. I want to write it in order. And we have 25 minus 18 plus 7. Kind of a nice one. Just a polynomial question here. Just basically squaring a binomial and then adding something to it. Standard form, it did have to be written in that correct order. Everything had to be fully combined. Good with 29? Okay. For question 30. Ooh, there's something with this one. Why don't you guys try this? I'm going to pull up the model responses. So we actually went over this lesson today, the idea of like what makes something a function. So it says the two relations are not functions. So they're telling you there's something wrong with them. Explain how you could change each one so that they could become a function. So two things you need to do here. Like what would you change about relation one and what would you change about relation two so that it would become a function? You want to be as clear as possible. So take a moment to try that. Something just came back to me about this one that was strange. I think a lot of people just a lot going on for a 2 point question because you had to explain two different things. They also just weren't sure like what to say to change it. Oh, okay, yeah, I remember now. Because yeah, you could look. They're giving you like the power of anything you want. Like, what would you change? You could do anything you want. Okay, so what could we change about relation one? Doesn't it say to explain? So do you actually have to do it? No, yeah, it's like in words. We don't have to physically. We don't have to like draw a new graph. What would you change about the? That's a piecewise, like all different pieces. Let me ask you guys this. What's wrong about it? Like, where's the mistake that makes it not a function? Yeah, the problem is right here. The problem is 4, right? You have fails the vertical line test, one x values, two y values. So there's a few things you could say. I'm gonna just write one of them because this has unlimited answers. This was a very annoying question to grade because of this. Um, oops. I'm gonna say and think about why my answer makes sense. I'm going to say make the point at 420 an open circle. Now think about that for a moment. I could have also said 430. So make 420, the point 4 comma 20, an open circle. Why would that then make it a function? Because it's technically not repeating anymore. And no, you don't have to physically like fix it. But imagine if this was an open circle instead of a closed one. Would it be an issue anymore? No. I could have said make 430 an open circle. We had some people last year that said like slide something along the words of like slide this graph over so that it starts at 5. Very frustrating question to grade because there was just like an unlimited number of things you could do. Basically, you just needed something that fixed the issue at 4. Slide the graph over, make an open circle. You say Trini, that's a little confusing the way you phrase it. I would probably just reference the graph itself. You're more so like talking about the equation, which is kind of the same thing, but it's a little wordy. Yeah. I would just say, hey, change it to an open circle. Now, what can we change about the set of points? What could we change about the set of points? I could just say something like this, because remember, you could do anything you want. I'll say remove negative 4, 4. So if I take this point away, because in this one the negative 4 is the issue. If I take that point away, is it a function? Yeah. X doesn't repeat if I remove the one where it was repeating. So I think some people are just confused of like, oh, what do I do here? What do they mean by fix it? You could do anything you want. So delete that point, change negative 4 to 7. You could do anything you want. Very frustrating question to grade. I'm looking over the models. What did this person say? Someone said remove this point. The person said remove this point. If I remember in my class, a lot of people said like change it. So like change negative 4 to positive 4, change negative 4 to 3, something where it was a different value. Change one of the negative 4s. Yep. Or you could just say delete it, remove it. Yeah. I guess you could have technically said that for the graph too. You could have said like delete the middle piece, remove that middle segment. So kind of just a weird question. I'm looking at the models. This got a 1 out of 2. Let's see why. You can't have repeating x values. You would have to change one of the negative 4s. Ooh, that got a 1 out of 2. Why did that get a 1 out of 2? You can't have repeating x values. You would have to change one of the -4s. I guess it's not saying what to do, so it's not very clear. So maybe give a follow-up like change the -4 to something else. So they treat it as just saying change a -4 as incomplete. So you did want to, I guess, give something as specific as possible. If you just said change a -4, it's like, okay, to what? Because what if I change it to a -5? That it's still no good. So I guess being specific was important here. Yeah, it doesn't say relation one. It says change each one, each relation. So one and two. Okay, let's keep rolling. But yeah, this one was just a little strange. A little weird. I feel for like an easy topic, they kind of made this question phrased awkwardly, and people just weren't sure what to say. I think that was the issue, maybe too. That people just said change the -4, but they're like, "Ooh, that's not specific enough," because you want to change it to something different, right? So just say it. Change a -4 to a 7. That got a 2 out of 2. If you just said change it, it was a little like, "Ooh, that's not really clear." Okay. 31. Why don't I give you guys a minute to try that one? Factor this completely. Factor this trinomial completely. Take a moment to try that. We're almost done with the part twos. Oh man, another quad formula. Ba, 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 ba. Students in 722, please bring your packets on the field trip tomorrow. I want to do a quick lesson on the bus ride to Adventureland. Please bring your written packets. They do have TVs, so I'm going to AirPlay my iPad and we'll be able to do a lesson. Okay, so factoring completely, what do we always say with that phrase? It's kind of a reminder, red flag, whatever you want to call it. You're going to factor more than once. Yeah. What I would do first here, pull out a 2. Don't try to just jump into trash or eyeglass. Pull out a GCF. Okay. If you did that, you got a 1 out of 2. So you technically did factor it. You didn't do very much, but you did get a 1 out of 2. However, you could factor this more. We then have a sum product. Sum product, what adds up to 8 and multiplies to -9? That would be +9 and -1. So you would look like this. Okay. And this is your final answer. So GCF and then sum product. It's giving. Not a bad one. Always be on the lookout for factoring completely. I think it's a little bit trickier when it's like a dots related factoring completely, because those can kind of hide in plain sight a little bit more. Like, ooh, I didn't see that, or oh, I did. The one that was on your mock, people lost a point just doing something weird. This one was kind of hard to make a mistake, I guess, but 2 parentheses x plus 9, x minus 1. The order that you write doesn't matter. Pretty straight up. And kind of annoying. They've been doing this, I guess, recently because you guys had one like this too. This is ultimately, it's going to be wait, can you do this? No. This is going to be like a quad formula question as a part two. Very annoying because that's a lot of work to do just for 2 points. So I'm just going to jump right into it. The good news is for quad formula, you have that formula on your reference sheet. So you don't need to memorize it. I'm just going to kind of quickly do this. B squared is 64. I think some of you guys messed up the B squared. We always have issues with like negative signs and squaring it. So just be careful with that. On your mock, it was like -2 squared. And then I saw people write like -4 in their work. So keep in mind, when you square something, it should always be positive. B squared is 64 here, not -64. Also negative b to start out, so that's going to become positive 8. I don't even care about simplifying the radical because it does say nearest tenth. So my radical 12 times 3 is 36. 64 minus 36 is going to be what? 28. And now what I'm going to do is just enter it in my calculator. 28 can be simplified. However, I don't care because it says nearest tenth. That's that. And we do have to do this twice. One where you're adding and one where you're subtracting. And nearest tenth is 1 decimal place. So you should get something here. Okay. 2.2, it's 2.21. So 2.2 and negative 0.45. So that's going to become negative 0.5. Are your two answers. 2.2 and negative 0.5. You guys had one just like this. Label A, B, and C. Plug into your formula. I would highlight this point. If you like lost points on this one on your mock, just be careful with squaring B. That should always be positive. I got positive 0.5. Oh, shoot. It is positive. Why did I say negative? Yeah, I had this on my calculator. I'm not lying. I just read it wrong, I guess. Yeah, it's 0.45, so positive 0.5. Thank you. 2.2 and 0.5. Yeah, if you have trouble with the discriminant part of it, just maybe type in that whole thing. I said that when we first did quad formula, like if the discriminant is the part that you're messing up, maybe just literally write it as it appears in your calculator screen, just to make sure like you got that 28. Okay, kind of an annoying one because you're kind of doing a lot of work for 2 points. All right, that's it for the part twos. How we doing on time? Okay, 30 minutes. Let's see, part threes. We got an A-ROC question, system of inequalities, a Lin reg, and then you can guess it. We have a system. All right, so 5 more. We'll maybe speed run these a little bit. For 33, you had 2 system questions. You had 3 system questions in these last 5. We're going to do a system graphically here. You have a system of inequalities, and then we also have a system word problem as the last one. So a lot of systems, to close out the test. Okay, so here we're doing a weird system, but a absolute value quadratic. You don't see a lot of those. Okay, making tables very crucial. You don't need to, but it just helps. Okay, for the absolute value, it's going to look something like this. It's basically just going to be a V shape that's shifted up 1 unit. I would lay my ruler down, trace it. Okay, arrows on both sides. It is function notation, so when I label it, I can also just do f of x. Okay, graphing an absolute value, not super difficult, not that much harder than doing a line. Make a table to help catch mistakes. You don't want to realize you plotted it wrong. For the quadratic, I'm going to do the same thing. To help with my table, I'm going to do use my calculator. We could do negative b over 2a. We have a few options for making sure we have an accurate or a good table. Typing this into my calculator, I could visually see the vertex at 310. So I'm not going to worry about doing negative b over 2a. If I didn't see it, I would maybe, what is it, g of x? If I didn't see the vertex, I would maybe want to just verify in case it's hiding at a decimal or something. Again, you don't need to make a table, but very, very highly recommended. 310 is the vertex, so I'm going to put that in the middle, and then I'm going to build around that. About 3 or 4 values, depending on what you can fit. Just reading this right off my calculator. And now I can put my calculator down and just focus on the graph. Sometimes when you try to go from one to the other, it could be a little confusing. I'm going to do this in a different color just to help with seeing it. 0, 1, so already I see the hit there. 1, 6. This is going to be an upside down quadratic because of the negative sign. Okay, I was a little sloppy there on the right side, but you get the idea. And now let's zoom out. Okay, there was a follow-up, I believe. So I labeled, I graphed them nice and neat. I see they hit. What should I say for this? Determine all values of x for which f of x equals g of x. Remember that how you answer this part is important. 0 and 5. If you say coordinates, you're wrong. We just want the x values here. We always say read this question carefully. I put a question just like this in your packet. And it said the same thing, like, hey, what are the x values? Putting a coordinate is like me asking you what time it is, and you say Thursday. Okay, you answered the question, but just not what I was looking for. All values of x, just give me the x values. So they hit at 0 and they hit at 5. We don't need coordinates. We don't need the y values, just the x value. Okay, labeling important, arrows, making a table. I know my handwriting's a little sloppy here. I'm trying to go quick, but making nice, neat tables, making nice, neat graphs. I would probably touch up the right side of my quadratic. My hand like slipped a little bit, but you get the idea. Okay, not a bad one because you could use tables. Anything where you could like use the calculator is a nice crutch or a nice tool. All right, this is a good one to kind of let you guys chew on for a moment. They even give you a table, I guess, to help read the points because some of them are not exactly clear. Yeah, I want to give you a moment. This is just like reading a function graph. I don't know what topic you would throw this under. We see a rock, we see increasing, few like just general function stuff. So state the entire interval where the temperature is increasing. State the 3-hour interval with the greatest rate of change. And then state the average rate of change from hour 12 to hour 24. Explain what this means in context. Ooh, okay. So let's take a moment for this one. I had someone that got a 99 on the Regents because of this question. Got a 99 because of this question. He was not very happy. Okay, so where is the temperature increasing? They're very forgiving with how you write this. I was looking at the models, and I'll tell you guys how the kid wrote it, and they counted it as fine. I just said someone got a 99 last year because of this question, and I'll tell you what it was. Where is it increasing? Between 6 and 12. So I think most of us, are the variables x and y here? It doesn't really say. Most of us would probably write it like this. Um, this is not a coordinate. What this means is between 6 and 12, right? The model that I'm looking at, the person wrote this and they treated it as fine, like 0-12. They're very forgiving with how you write increasing and decreasing intervals. But yeah, it's increasing in this section here. So between 6 and 12. How you write it, not really important. I guess you could even write it in words from 6 to 12, TO 12. Yep, that would be the inequality way. 6 less than x less than 12. Yep. Where was the greatest 3-hour window? So the graph goes in intervals of 3. Where was the greatest rate of change? Which window had the greatest rate of change? Doesn't even say that we need to calculate it. We just need to state it. We don't need to show any work. Just state. So just 9 to 12. 9 to 12. Very good. Visually, I guess you could see that. From 9 to 12, it's the steepest. You could actually calculate it as well. Remember, the table did give you the nice numbers here. So from 9 to 12, it was what? It went up 14 over 3 hours. So 14 over 3. Nothing else was that large. Okay. The first 3 hours are 5. The next 3 are 5. The next 3 is 8. So looking at the table is probably an easier thing than looking at the graph because it goes by threes. That's the biggest jump. It goes up 14. The next 3, it went down 3, down 4, down 5, down 6. So between 9 and 12 was the greatest jump. And what's the average rate of change from 12 to 24? I'm not going to look at the graph. I'm going to look at the table because it has the exact numbers. And then explain what that means in context. So this, I'm going to do basically slope, right? I'm going to find the difference between my y values and my x values, and then just express it as, simplify it, and then explain what that means. So the difference in my y values, I go from 92 down to 74. That's going to be a difference of negative 18, going down 18. And then x-wise, I'm going from 12 to 24. That's a difference of 12. So my average rate of change is going to be negative 1.5. You flipped it the other way, Grayson, yeah. So you're treating this as x and this as y. So negative 1.5, what does that mean in context? If I say the average rate of change is negative 1.5, what does that mean? What does that mean in this situation? Remember, your variables are temperature and hours. How would you explain this? So this question is kind of like 1 point, 1 point, 1 point, and the explanation is 1 point as well. So far we have a 3 out of 4. How would you explain what negative 1.5 means in context? From hour 12 to 24, the temperature decreases. Yeah, exactly. Great explanation. The temperature drops 1.5 degrees per hour, right? The negative reflects a decrease or drop, whatever word you want to use there, that it's going down, right? And it's also per hour because it's average rate of change. It's making it a rate per hour. Hey, the temperature on average, it's going down 1.5 degrees per hour. Yep. Do you know why I said the student earlier got a 99 last year? What he did? Got everything correct. I forgot if he said drops or decrease, but this is what he wrote. I'll add it and see if you even catch it. He said the temperature, I think he said decreases. The temperature decreases by negative 0.5 degrees per hour. So you can't even catch it when you say it out loud, but you're kind of doing like a double negative. The temperature drops by negative 0.5. You're actually saying it increases if you say that. Which kind of makes sense because you're like, I want to write the number that I just found, but you saying the word drops is already a negative. You saying decreasing is a negative, so you wouldn't want to make it a double negative. Yeah, so kind of annoying. His name is Andy. He's on the math team, if you know him. But I just remember, I'm not making. He did very, very well. I got an 89, but just something that came to mind. Andy Liu, yes, Andy Liu. All right, one of the better, math team kids in our school. All right, we have a system of inequalities. This is kind of a good thing to take a look at. We struggled with it a little bit on the mock. We went over it during a review lesson this week. I know some of you guys weren't there if you were in the service league yesterday, so this is a nice question. What I found is people, I brought this up, people made a mistake because they kind of just jumped right into it. They're just like, let me graph this, blah, blah, blah. What you need to do is kind of show your work for getting into, get it into Y form. We don't want to say Y equals, but get into Y form, write down your 4 bullet points, and then graph it. Also annoying, this is not ready to go. It kind of looks good. Like, oh, okay. That says X. I don't want to graph it like that. So even though it looks good, I want to kind of mess around with that one. Let's do that first, actually. So that bottom one, I want to switch the place of the X and the Y. We don't graph it in X equals. We want it to say Y equals. So I'm going to subtract 3Y, and I'm going to subtract X at the same time. I'm just going to switch the place of the X and the Y. Okay, did everyone follow that? I subtracted 3Y. I brought the X over as well. I'm going to divide both sides by -3. Since I'm dividing by a negative, I do have to flip my sign. So that less than is going to become greater than. I'm going to get y is greater than 1/3 x minus 2. And this is where I'd have to put my bullet points. M equals 1/3. B equals -2. I'm going to have a dotted line. And I'm going to shade, say the symbol out loud. I'm going to shade above. It's greater than, I'm going to shade above. This is what was missing from a lot of you guys on the mock. Didn't take me very much time here, but jotting down these bullet points is definitely going to only help me. So now when I do my graph, I'm not going to shade just yet, but -2, I'm going to go up 1/3. Some of you guys made a mistake with slope. Some of you made a mistake with the B value. Some of you made a mistake with where to shade. So taking that extra moment, in the grand scheme of questions, this isn't a very difficult one. There's some questions where you're like, I don't even know what this is asking. This one, you know what to do. We don't want to make some sort of technical error, calculation error, whatever you want to call it, algebra error. I'm not going to shade this just yet. I'm going to label with the original off screen a little bit so it doesn't get in the way. Now for the second one, I'm going to get that into Y form as well. I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. I'm going to do this over here. And now I'm going to divide by 3. I don't need to flip the sign here. I'm not dividing by a negative. Again, this work was, I think we tend to not want to show work. And then that messes us up. I don't know. Okay, my 4 bullet points. Above. And solid. Okay, it also begins at -2. Slope is -2/3, so down to right 3, down to right 3, up to back 3. This is a solid or normal line. And I'm going to be shading above here. Okay, so now let's think about this. The purple line is shaded above. The green line is also above. So the overlaps are going to be in this area. Did it say to put an S yet? Did it put a large S? Do something like this. Okay. You don't need to go crazy with shading and be like, I want to shade every box above it. That's perfectly fine. I could label. Technically, you do only need to label one. So what I did was fine, but some people just do this out of habit. Is 4, -2 a solution? Let's see, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, -2. Not a solution. Let's plot it just to show. Excuse me. Okay, so you could say something like, no, you guys did a really nice job with these explanations. So in this case, you could just say like, not in the shaded region, doesn't satisfy both inequalities, right? Think about like what the definition of a solution is. You don't need to do it algebraically. You don't need to like show that, do the math. Explain, I could just say in words, doesn't satisfy both. Yeah, that's the goal. If you didn't hear that already, like the mock set's kind of like a baseline. So if you're like, oh man, I'm a little disappointed, I got an 88. Over the next 2 or 3 weeks, obviously you're going to improve. You're probably going to take it a little bit more seriously. I don't think anyone like really sat and crammed and studied for the mock. So obviously most people go up. Obviously, if you got a 99 or 100, puts a little bit of pressure on you. You can only really go down, but most people go up. Yeah. So again, this question, while we get intimidated by a system of inequalities, hopefully, I did it kind of quickly here, I know, but get it in Y form, jot down your bullet points, and hopefully that will make things more user friendly and catch any mistakes. Questions with this one? I know we have like 10 minutes left. I'm going to try to squeeze in the last two. But any questions since you plotted 4, -2? Why would I get a point off for that? I just did it to show you. I mean, you didn't need to plot it. No. Oh, you're saying like I plotted it? Yeah, I just did it to more so show. You wouldn't like lose a point for that reason though. If you did, no. Yeah, people would know like that you were kind of just checking is how they would look at it. Like, oh, he was seeing to see if it was in the shaded region. We did have someone lose a point. We did have someone lose a point for the mock regions because they wrote this. I'm not going to say who it was, but they wrote something along the lines of it doesn't satisfy both equations, and I had to take off one. Remember, if you say something incorrect, like we have to, we have to recognize it. So what was wrong there? He said equations instead of inequalities. Okay. This one, we did have people that just like, and this was a relatively recent topic. They didn't know what to do for when it said linear regression. Linear regression is line of best fit. It's literally called linreg on your calculator. And we did it so recently, I was confused as to why everyone didn't get a 4 out of 4 on this. You're going to see this question, and we should treat this as like, all right, yes, all right. I can calm down a little bit. I know I'm getting +4 on this. There's no reason why everyone shouldn't get a perfect score on this. So let's see. You should get y equals, well, you want to make sure you round nearest hundredth. In this one, y equals 184.89x. I think was this the one I put on your stat test? I don't know. Minus 1706.07. Did I put this on the stat test? I forget if I put this one or another one. Maybe. Okay, using L1 and L2, and then stat, calc, linreg, choice 4. Correlation coefficient is going to be that R value. My R value here is to the nearest hundredth, 0.985, so 0.99. And then what does it mean in the context? So I don't want to just say, me doing this, your mock regions didn't have that word, so it didn't matter. But me doing this is a 3 out of 4 because I'm not explaining it in context. In context, you would just want to reference your variables, which are height and weight. I think that I did put this on your test. Now it's coming back to me. There's a strong and positive relationship between height and weight. Between height and weight, something like that. Okay, you want to reference the nouns in the problem. Again, you're gonna see this as a part 3. Know how to handle it, know how to do lin reg, know how to, just write down the R value, make sure you round correctly. And then if it says in context, just talk about the nouns. You could even be more specific and say, as height increases, so does weight. But just what I wrote is perfectly fine. And last one. You could probably guess what it's going to be here. A system. They tell you which variables to use, R and D. So our system is 3 roses and 2 daisies for 3188, and 2 roses and 1 daisy for 1892. Okay, writing the system a little bit easier. You guys had a tough one on the mock. I know the coins are a little bit more annoying, but setting up the system, very important. Make sure you read it correctly, not quickly. 3 roses, 3R, 2 daisies. Make sure you put the right numbers. Just double check it before you start all the solving. Okay, I got it. Good. I'm going to solve this, and then there is a follow-up after. So what I'm going to do, I'll practice using elimination. I'm going to multiply the bottom one by -2. So I'm using elimination. You could also use substitution. One of the variables is solved for. D is already, isolated, but I think this is more common to use elimination, so I'm going to do that. Get -3784. We get -1R. And I get roses are 596 each. Now, once I know how much roses are, I'm going to plug that in and solve for D. So 596 times 3, 3188 minus that. Ooh, daisy is just $7. Okay. So we have setting up a system and solving for the second variable. Once I know how much roses are, I plug those into the top equation. I solved for D, and I believe it works out perfectly to $7. So roses are $5.96, and daisies are $7. And there was a part C here. This is a 6-point question, so kind of like 222 usually, or 231, I guess, depending how involved this is. The last part says if Dana waited, she would have paid $4.50 for each rose and $6.50 for each daisy. So if there was a sale, determine the total amount of money she would have saved by buying all. Determine the total amount of money she would have saved by buying all of her flowers during the sale. So what we need to do is figure out, I guess, treat those variables like those numbers. So we're going to plug in 450 for roses and 650 for daisies, and then just find the difference between the two. So really not much to this one. So how much she spent in total, let's go back. Kind of phrase a little weird. She spent in total 3188. I'm getting these from our equation, and 1892. So how much did she spend on flowers? Because remember, she bought them twice. 3188 plus 1892. She spent $50.80. Now, we also need to incorporate how many of each flower she bought. So in total, she bought 5 roses and she bought 3 daisies. Keep that in mind. Okay, so now over here, I'm going to do 5 times the sale price of the roses. How many daisies did I say? 3. And 3 times the sale price of the daisies. Where did I get 5 and 3 from? That's how many total roses and how many total daisies she bought. Kind of like a weird follow-up, but. So if you add that up, you'll get $42. So how much would she have saved if she did that? So what's the difference between these? $8.80. Okay, you would just subtract the two. And 2 minutes to spare. That is the June 2023 exam. I'll go back. I know we go through you know, we always have a surplus of time when I'm doing the multiple choice. And then I'm always kind of like rushing to squeeze in the written, but I will post this. I'm going to try to maybe clean things up a little bit because I was a little sloppy, but I will post this key. Hopefully these explanations help out. I'll also post the video of this recording. Let me stop the recording, speaking of.